Starting off this week with a huge media management project. At the end of my last vlog, I showed that I went to the premiere of my first feature film as a cinematographer. Now that project's complete, I can go through and essentially delete all of the excess rushes that weren't used in the final film. And it took a very long time. I think it took over 24 hours to get this project consolidated. But it was a very therapeutic process, and it was nice to free up a lot of space on my network attached storage. You love to see it. Gone from a 8.6 terabyte project to a 3.5 terabyte project. So there's a huge amount of space I get to wipe from my Synology. So I picked up the tilter cage for the FX6 this week. I had a look at a few other options around by companies like Wooden Camera, Bright Tangerine, and this one for the price just seemed to be the best option. It gave you everything, including a top cheese plate, a side bracket, a V-mount plate for the back, and a tripod base plate, which comes with a support for Metabones adapters, which is quite useful for me. And for this whole kit was less than what some of the accessories by other companies like Wooden Camera would cost. I think I looked at the Wooden Camera V-mount plate, which allows you to basically keep a BPU battery in the FX6 so you can hot swap the V-locks. And that on its own, I'm sure, was about £500. Whereas this whole system is less than 300, I think, when I bought it at least. So to get a full cage package for that compared to £500 just for a V-mount plate, it just seemed like an absolute bargain compared to what else was out there. It's one of the simple pleasures in life as a camera operator, I think, is getting to assemble and rig up these cameras, especially when you're using equipment and cage parts which are specifically engineered for the camera you're using. There's just something really satisfying about building it and seeing all these little parts slot into place perfectly. And whilst I was building the camera, I decided to actually first try it out without the V-lock plate. One, because most of the V-locks I have at the moment are quite heavy, a little bit heavier and bigger than I'd like to put on the Sony. But I was also just keen to try it out and see if I could keep the rig as lightweight as possible for now. But it also meant that I could fit the camera easily into my camera bag, which is currently configured for the Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro. So having the V-lock plate on there would have meant it was actually too long to fit in. So something I'm going to have to configure at some point later. One potential issue I came across that when I put the camera in the bag, because of the tilter base plate as well as the Manfrotto base plate, which I mentioned in a previous video, it makes the camera quite tall, which as you can see means that the lid of the bag is kind of leaning down on the shotgun microphone holder. And because of this slight issue, I wasn't entirely sure if this rig was going to actually work. To make things simpler, I actually disassembled the camera and took it back to its bare bones. And because of this slight height issue, it made me question whether this rig was going to be right for me. I obviously don't want to go buying another bag just for this new camera. So I'm going to take it back to basics for now and revisit this issue a little bit later in the video. I've also been looking at getting some security upgrades to the van. Recently saw a fellow DP working in similar areas me get his van broken into and had a bunch of kit stolen. The way they got in was by peeling off the side door of the van, drilling through the lock so they could unlock the deadbolt, and then peeling the side door so they could get access inside, which is a very common way for thieves to get into vans. I was very aware of that even before I bought the van. And I guess in a way I've been sort of kidding myself into thinking like, I don't really need that much security. Just having a perimeter alarm and a deadlock is enough. But after recent events, rethinking that approach. So I'm looking at getting one of these anti-peel security brackets. So this is basically meant to help stop thieves from being able to bend the side door, and some of these external shields, which are basically put over where thieves would drill in to the van door and then be able to access the locking mechanism. So they can just undo the deadbolts or just open the door from inside. So it's going to be quite a costly purchase. It's about £500, just over £500 or so, but it's a few £100s spent versus potentially losing tens of thousands worth of equipment. I think it's going to be a worthwhile purchase. Got to replace some of the batteries in my AirTags. I use a bunch of these in my kit bags just so I can keep track of them in case they ever go walkabout. They're also quite handy if you travel abroad. You can sort of track them through the airport, make sure they get to the destination safely. They do last quite a while, the batteries, but you obviously do need to replace them every now and then. And the app on the phone is pretty good at notifying you when the battery's low, so you know when to replace them in plenty of time before it runs flat. But these are great. I would highly recommend them to anyone who's an iPhone user and has equipment. They bring a lot of peace of mind and just that extra layer of security when it comes to work. Picked up a screen protector for the FX6 stock monitor this week as well. I always kind of hate putting these things on just because it always feels like a little bit stressful, just trying to get it perfectly aligned and not get any air bubbles. But I think after a little bit of trial and error, we managed to do a pretty good job here. It's a pretty light loadout compared to normal shoots. Just taking a minimum amount of gear, a couple of 60Xs with batteries, light stands, nan-light tubes, tripod under there, camera bag and gimbal just in case. And with that, we are on to the first shoot of the week. It's with a regular client of mine who are a production company who work a lot with football brands such as the Premier League, the FA and similar companies. And a lot of the shoots I do for them involve doing case studies with grassroots football as the subject matter. So we quite often are doing interviews with people and shooting B-roll of grassroots football games, usually with young kids and the coaches. So at the moment, we've been doing a lot of shoots involving various coaches around the country at different football clubs, and basically just kind of showing what they do, where they do it, and the positive influence they have on their community. This specific shoot took place in Malton in Northampton, so I picked up the producer and we drove down there. It was a very late shoot. We didn't have to get there till about 5 o'clock, I think, in the evening, because most of the coaches we film are volunteers and have day jobs. So a lot of time, these shoots have to take place after school and working hours. So I had most of my day to myself and then had to drive down there in the evening. But these are always quite nice and simple shoots. They usually follow the same formula of we shoot an interview first and then shoot B-roll to accompany it. And it's just a nice chance to meet some interesting people and hear their stories. For the interview here, we shot it on the AstroTurf, so we obviously didn't have any mains power available to us. So to keep things simple and just introduce a bit of shape to the subject, I added in a nan-light tube for the key light, and that was all we used in terms of lighting. Keep things nice and simple. These shoots in particular are where I think the FX6 is a perfect little camera setup for it, because they are very run and gun. We really don't have any control of the environment apart from when we're doing the interviews. And as you can see, during the B-roll, I literally just have to run around and shoot as much as I can because everything can happen so quickly. And especially in these sessions, you maybe at most get an hour time slot to get all the coverage you need for this one case study video. So it's a lot of running around, hand swap lenses quickly, and because the FX6 is so light, it just really helps with reducing fatigue. This is the type of shoot where I wouldn't particularly enjoy shooting it on the Ursa Mini Pro just because of how heavy that is, and a lot of time on these specific shoots I will shoot on the 7200 quite a lot, so having to run with that on an Ursa with a VCT shoulder pad on the bottom just so I can have rods with a lens support on it makes that a very heavy setup to be running around a football field with. This is one of those perfect situations where the FX6 really excels, in my opinion, just for the sake of making my job and my experience of shooting it a lot easier and a lot more comfortable. Yep, that is 3:48 a.m, not p.m. It's a glamorous lifestyle. And now we're off to Madrid. This is quite a funny job because in a super short nutshell, we flew out, shot one interview, and then flew back. That was the whole job. Not every day that happens. But how this job came about was a client of mine who I used to do a lot of post-production work for back when I was editing, got in touch and said originally it was going to be maybe, I think, 2 to 3 days at this conference. And then quite literally, I got a text from the producer a week prior asking if I still had those dates booked. And I said yes. And they said, great, it's now going to just be 1 day, I'm afraid. Which is a bit of a shame, but it's how it sometimes goes. I think it just became apparent that they weren't going to need event coverage like they did before. I think the client maybe decided they just didn't want a event highlights film being made. But I think some wires got crossed. The job essentially had been cancelled, but the client thought that we were still coming out. So there was a bit of confusion involved basically, and the client basically ended up saying, well, since you're already coming out, which apparently we weren't, you might as well come and shoot an interview with this person. So this was a dry hire job for me. I didn't have to take any kit with me, which is a rarity. I'm usually wet hire, but sometimes when it comes to travel, I'll take a bit of a pay cut for the ease and peace of mind of knowing that I've not got to travel with any of my own kit and worry about it getting lost or stolen or damaged in transit. So when we arrived, we went to the rental house where they had reserved a Sony FX9 package along with a few aperture lights, a couple of 300Ds with the soft boxes, as well as audio kit. It was basically the whole package needed to do a simple, straightforward interview. So once we picked up the gear, we headed to the venue, which luckily for us doubled as the hotel that we were all staying at. And we basically just picked a spot that we thought would be best to shoot the interview. We got the camera and the light set up, did a few technical tests, made sure the teleprompter was working and was going to be at the speed that we needed it to be for the interviewee. And then we were essentially done for the day. The FX9 is a nice camera, but having handled this beast, which obviously has this extension on the back for V-Lock batteries to be used, it definitely confirmed that getting the FX6 was the right choice, because even though Sony cameras are generally known to be quite light, having worked with the FX9 on this job, it's a pretty heavy camera. Granted, it had a Arri top handle and cheese plate, as well as this V-Lock extension on the back, but it was a surprisingly heavy camera. I don't think it was any lighter than my Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro, so it was just a nice little confirmation for me that getting the FX6 was definitely the right choice, because that thing is so light and small in comparison. That's going to be fun. And this is the following day and the final setup for the interview. We're using the two 300Ds that I mentioned, both with lanterns. They worked really well because they obviously provided a nice key and backlight for the talent, but they provided a nice spread to spill onto the background, so it created a nice clean look for the interviews. I still think it can be possible to create nice looking corporate interviews without them looking too flat, but without them being too contrasty either. And that was it. That was the interview done. I think it probably only took an hour. Very simple, very straightforward. It's kind of the beauty of being freelance, I think, is you get this variety of jobs. Somewhere you're absolutely run ragged trying to get all this different type of coverage. And then you get jobs like this, which are super relaxed, super simple. It's just nice to kind of get those easy jobs every now and then. After flying back from Vienna, I packaged up the carriage from my Syrup Magic Carpet Pro slider that I mentioned in the previous vlog. Had developed an issue where it wasn't locking the quick release base plate into position anymore. So I'm sending that in for repair, and hopefully we'll get it sent back to me within a week or so. I also decided to take the plunge and commit to this vlogging project by picking up an Insta360 camera. This is going to make the process of filming behind the scenes on these shoots a little bit easier for me. I'm going to be able to rig up the 360 camera onto my normal camera rig and let it roll all day and just capture everything that happens on the shoot. It's definitely going to add some extra steps to the post-production side of things, but I think the trade-off of being able to just set this up and let it roll all day and not have to worry about getting different angles and things like that is going to make the process of shooting the content for these vlogs a little bit easier for me. So I think it's going to be worth it and provide an interesting perspective to the shoots. Just been making a couple of adjustments to the FX6 with the tilter cage. The issue I was running into before is that because of this base plate with the rails, and then I'm using this Manfrotto tripod plate which has the little feet that come out, it was making the camera quite tall, and it basically meant that it's slightly protruding because of this microphone holder in the think tank bag. It's difficult to see, but the microphone mount is slightly protruding there, which I thought would be a real issue for it. That would mean that I couldn't close the bag. But what I found is that if I take out some of the pouches in this mesh pocket here, it actually closes down quite nicely. It doesn't look it on camera, but there's actually a lot of depth to this. When I put my hand underneath here, I can actually feel that it's not really actually putting a lot of pressure on the mount itself. It's still not ideal, you know, but I think just doing a slight bit of reorganization with this pocket here so I have less pouches in it, it should actually solve the problem and allow me to fit the FX6 in here with both the tilter plate and this Manfrotto base plate without any real issues. The alternatives would be to either get rid of this Manfrotto plate on the bottom because it is slightly taller than a traditional tripod plate, just because of these feet that poke out. It has to be a little bit taller than a normal one. But having only used it on one or two shoots so far, I've absolutely fallen in love with this thing. It's so handy to be able to put the camera down on the ground, and this just stabilizes it so well, so you're not going to worry about it tipping over when you put it down somewhere. And the other alternative is to get rid of the tilter plate. But one thing I've been wanting for a while is actually having a base plate like this. Something that offers a bit of support for the Metabones adapter as well, but something that allows me to have rails on the bottom of the camera without having to have a shoulder pad, which obviously just is a lot bigger, it's a lot bulkier, and it's a lot heavier than something like this. So this is a lot more compact and lightweight. So for me, it's really a case of needing to have both now. But I think, as I said in the last clip, removing those pouches from the lid of the bag should mean I'm able to have this set up with both of these attached. So of course it's Black Friday, so I'm having a little browse to see if there's any decent deals on for any bits of gear that I want to get. Nothing terribly exciting, just looking to get a couple of these small rig 99 watt hour V-locks for the FX6. A couple of smaller D-tap splitters, looking at getting a 30cm and a 20cm one. This Sony card reader was recommended to me in a group chat. It's supposed to be very, very fast for both SD and CF Express A cards. And these shape B&C cables, even though they're expensive, they're the best ones I've had. They've been really robust. And also because they're at a right angle for both heads, they tend to be really useful for me in my setups. And also just looking at getting a couple of these 1/4 inch sprig cable management doodads. One little tip that might be useful to know is to try and use cashback websites when you're doing your online shopping. So I use Top Cashback most of the time. I think there's other ones available like Quidco and things like that. But they basically just have like these partnerships with these different stores and shops and brands. And basically all it does is you click on the link, they put a little cookie into your browser, and then it registers your cashback. So you get 20% with eBay, Look Fantastic, Samsung, all these Black Friday deals. So you can basically get even more of a discount if you're shopping with a website and they have products already at a reduced price. And then you also get a percentage of cashback as well. So it can be a pretty significant saving. As an example, I'm obviously looking to buy 2 of these small rig V-locks. They're already at a 30% discount on eBay itself, but then also Top Cashback are offering a 20% discount if you click on this link and buy something through eBay. So with that as well, it's coming to about £321 now with an extra 20% off. That will make this total order about just under £258. So again, pretty significant savings. And that's it for this week. Just a couple of shoots mixed in with a lot of gear talk, which won't always be the case. But in the next video, I'm going to be showing some behind the scenes from a weekend of shooting, some pickups for a independent feature film that I'm currently working on as the cinematographer. It's the first shoot that I've been able to utilize the 360 camera on. So stay tuned if you want to see some of that.